Hello everyone, welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah share. We are holding in Mishnah Berurah Chelik Vav, and we'll be learning today Mitzvah Hashem, Daf Tzadik Beis Amid Beis. We are continuing to learn Hilchos Sukkah. We pick up today 2 lines off the bottom in the Shulchan Aruch on Tzadik Beis Amid Aleph, Siman Taf Reish Lamed Sif Hey. So if you remember earlier in Sif Beis, the Mechaber gave us a case of the Sukkah Ha'asuya Kimin Gam, a sukkah that had two perpendicular walls in the shape of the Greek letter gamma, which is like a lamed or like a dalid, 2 perpendicular walls that meet at a right angle at a corner. And the Mechaber told us that in order to make this sukkah kosher, let's remember, for a sukkah to be kosher, we need a minimum of 3 walls. So the Mechaber told us to make this sukkah kosher, what do we need to do? We have to go to one of the open ends over here. We move away from the end of the wall a distance of slightly under 3 tvachim, which is the shear of lavud. Then we put up a post that is slightly over 1 tefach thick. By doing that, we have now closed off an area of 4 tvachim, because since the gap is less than 3 tvachim, we have the shear lavud. We're within the shear lavud, so that gives us slightly less than 3 tvachim. The post itself is a bit over a tefach, so now we have closed off an area of 4 tvachim. By doing that, we have roiv of 7 tvachim, which is the minimum shear of a sukkah, and we also have 4 tvachim closed, which is the minimum size of a chashuva mechitza. So we have 4 tvachim closed. Then we go ahead and we erect a tzuras haPesach from that 1 tefach plus post to another post that's at the end opposite the opposing corner over here. That's how we make our 3rd wall. Now we have a 3-wall sukkah and we have a kosher sukkah. Now let's take a look at what the Mechaber says here in Sif Hey. When we make the sukkah ha'asuya kimin gam kosher, betefach b'tzuras pesach, and we do this using the 1 tefach plus a bit post, and then a tzuras ha'pesach going to the end of the 3rd wall. Let's go back to the 2 complete walls. The Mechaber tells us now, even if the 2 complete walls have a lot of doorways in them, they have a lot of openings, and those doorways in the 2 complete walls are not closed off using a tzuras haPesach. They're actual openings, they're actual gaps, actual doorways. And now you have a situation where if we take all 4 walls of this sukkah, now this sukkah does not really have 4 walls, but all 4 sides of the sukkah, we have one side that's completely opened. We have another side which is only closed off using lavud, a 1 tefach plus a bit post, and another post to complete a tzuras haPesach. And then we have 2 whole walls, but the 2 whole walls have openings in them. If we would take all of the openings on all 4 sides of this sukkah, and we would combine them, and now we would compare all of the open space on all 4 sides to the closed space. So let's take a look at the ratio of open space to closed space. Meruba al ha'imid, the open space would be more than the closed space. Now it's very easy for that to happen because again, we have 4 sides to this sukkah. One side is completely open. Another side is only closed off with a 1 tefach plus a bit post and a tzuras haPesach. So in reality, that wall, the 3rd wall, is also almost completely open. Now we have 2 closed sides, but we're dealing with a situation where those closed sides also have openings in them. So says the Mechaber, even if when you measure the ratio of open space to closed space in this entire sukkah, you're going to have a situation where it's paretz meruba ala imid, you're going to have more open space than closed space. Kshera, this sukkah is still kosher. So again, what we're measuring over here is the open space on all 4 sides of the sukkah. By measuring the open space on all 4 sides, we have paretz meruba ala imid, says the Mechaber, this sukkah is still kosher. Let's take a look here in the Mishnah Berurah on Tzadik Beis Amid Beis Eis Katan Chav Beis. Kol ha'parutz yeh meruba. All of the open space in this sukkah will give us a situation where we have parutz meruba ala oimid. Ritzayna loymar. What the Mechaber wishes to say in this case is, al yedei ha'pirtzais sheyesh b'shtei hadafanos. When you take a look at the openings that are in the two closed walls, because we just said that even the two complete walls have openings in them. So, al yidei ha'pirtzais sheyesh b'shtei hadafanos. If you combine the openings that are in the two complete walls, im shtei hadafanos ha'prutzais, and you add that together with the open space that are in the other two sides of the sukkah, which the Mishnah Berurah calls the defanos ha'perutzos, the breached walls. Because let's remember, wall number 3 is really mostly breached. All you have is a 1 tefach plus post and another koneh, another post at the corner to close off Atzuras HaPesach. And the fourth wall is completely breached. There is no fourth wall. Yachad, when you combine all of these open spaces, parutz meruba ala oimid, then the parutz will be meruba ala oimid. In that case, the Mechaber says this sukkah is still kosher. Aval, however, the Chavetz Chaim is being very careful over here. He wants to make sure you learn this Mechaber correctly. And unfortunately, I had to reach out to him. I heard somebody who said share on this, who actually learned wrong pshat in this Mechaber. Aval, however, in ba'oisen shtei hadafanos hashleimos. But let's contrast this to a different case. If you look at the two complete walls of the sukkah, wall 1 and wall 2, the two perpendicular walls, if you look at the two complete walls, parat shebahen merub ala oimid shebahen, if on those two walls themselves, each one of them is paratz meruba ala oimid, each one of them has more gaps than closed space, aser. That would be aser. So the point that the Chavetz Chaim is making over here is realize what the Mechaber is saying. The Mechaber is telling you, in order to make this sukkah kosher, this 2.5 wall sukkah kosher, you need 2 complete walls. Then you could use lavud, Tzuras HaPesach for the third wall. But if you don't have 2 complete walls, now what does 2 complete walls mean? They have to be at least amid. They have to be at least amid meruba al haparutz. They have to be more closed than the openings that they have. And we're going to see later in the Mishnah Berurah, there's actually another requirement, and that is that the closed areas of those 2 walls have to measure at least 4 tfachim contiguous. You have to have at least a contiguous 4 tfachim in those 2 closed walls. So in order to use these eitzes of lavud and Tzuras HaPesach on wall number 3, and to have a completely open wall number 4, the 2 closed walls must be amin meruba ala parutz. What the Mechaber is telling me here in Sif A as a chiddush is, even though you have amin meruba ala parutz in those 2 walls, you still might have openings. Now, if you add those openings to the openings on side 3 and side 4, and you have parutz meruba ala oimid over the entire sukkah, you might think that disqualifies the sukkah. Kamash malon the Mechaber that no, it does not. If you have 2 whole walls and you have eitzes of lavud and Tzuras HaPesach on wall number 3 and a completely breached wall number 4, that's okay, even though in the totality you have parutz meruba ala oimid. But you cannot have parutz meruba ala oimid in the 2 complete walls. Continues the Chavetz Chaim here in Eis Katan Chav Beis. V'dafke im ha'paratzos hem yoser mishloisha tvachim. This that I'm telling you, that you cannot have breaches in the 2 standing walls, if those breaches are going to create a situation where you have parutz meruba ala oimid, that's only if the pirtzos, if the openings are at least 3 tfachim. Avalim heim pachas mishloisha tvachim, if the openings, if the gaps in walls number 1 and walls number 2 are less than 3 tvachim, then kalavud dummy, then we still have the sheer lavud, ve'avi kisasim, and they're considered closed, ve'ein shem pirtza aleh, and now they're not considered breaches. However, says the Chavetz Chaim, v'ayin b'Magen Avram reish Siman, you have to take a look at the Magen Avram at the beginning of Siman Taf Reish Lamed, who says, shedaitoi dedafke emoisa asukah me'arba tvanos. The Magen Avram has a chumrah. The Magen Avram says you want to use lavud, you want to create a wall out of, let's say, vertical posts with less than 3 tfachim between each post. That's only if you're making a 4-wall sukkah. If you're making a 3-wall sukkah, then the Chazal did not allow you to use lavud in walls 1 and walls 2. Walls 1 and walls 2 have to be complete walls. The Mechaber said, even if in the totality of the sukkah you're going to have paritz meruba ala oimid, it's okay. Ois chav gimel ala oimid v'dafke im ba'oimid yal kol panim shir makam chashuv. When I'm telling you that you need oimid, that you need closed areas in walls number 1 and walls number 2, here's where the Mishnah Berurah throws in another caveat. They have to have a makom chashuv, dahainu pas shel arba tfachim. You need to have a continuously closed area of 4 tfachim on wall number 1 and wall number 2. So it comes out after you learn Mishnah Berurah Eis Katan Chav Beis and Mishnah Berurah Eis Katan Chav Gimel that the Chavetz Chaim is telling you in walls number 1 and walls number 2 there are 2 requirements that must be met. One is that they have to be oimin meruba ala paritz, and the second one is that the makam ha'oimed, the closed areas, you have to have a closed area of a makam chashuv of at least 4 tfachim, which is the minimum makam chashuv of a mechitza, of a wall. Now we go to the Ramah, top line, Tzadik Beis Amud Beis. Rak sheliyu apsachim bakronos. Says the Ramah over here, when I'm telling you that you could have openings in walls number 1 and wall number 2, it's true that you could have openings in those walls, but the openings cannot be at the corner where wall number 1 and wall number 2 meet. You cannot have an opening over there. Why, says the Ramah? Ki amachitzais tzrichin lihiyais mechubarim kemin gam. Because he brings down from the Ran this whole shtickle Torah of making a sukkah ha'asuya kemin gam kosher using the 1 plus a bit post and lavud and a tzuras ha'pesach. It only works if wall number 1 and wall number 2 meet at a corner. They have to be closed. Now, I didn't see the Ran inside recently. I believe the reason for this is because if you remember, when we contrasted the case of Siv Beis and the case of Siv Gimel, in Siv Beis we have the Sukkah Hasuya Kimin Gam of the 2 perpendicular walls. In Siv Gimel we had the 2 parallel walls. The case of the 2 parallel walls is more chamur. It's more strict. Over there we say in order to make that sukkah kosher, you need a pas arba. You need a solid panel of 4 tfachim. So we treat that in a more strict manner. Why is that? We explained because 2 perpendicular walls do create a minimal enclosure. Excuse me. When you have 2 perpendicular walls like this, the area inside the 2 closed walls is enclosed to a certain degree. That's only true if the 2 walls meet at the corner. If there's an opening at the corner here, then it's really not enclosed because you can walk right through. So that's why we have over here the Ramah. The Ramah brings from the Ran that you cannot have an opening at that corner because the 2 perpendicular walls actually have to be closed off. Let's take a look at the Mishnah Berurah Chav Daled. Rak shelayu hapsachim. Now, if you want to see how careful you have to be when you learn the words of a Rishon, when you learn the words of the Shulchan Aruch, the words of the Ramah, take a look how the Chavetz Chaim was medayik over here. The Chavetz Chaim says that there seems to be something a little bit imprecise over here in the words of the Ramah. The Ramah makes reference to psachim, to doors, plural. And the Ramah says that the doorways, plural, cannot be located in the corners, plural. Says the Chavetz Chaim, what do you mean corners? We're only dealing with 1 corner in the case of the Sukkah Hasuya Kimin Gam. We have this corner. Over here, this is going to be opened. If this is the 3rd wall that we're going to repair, so to speak, what are we going to have? we're going to have an open space here of less than 3 tvachim, and then we're going to have a post. And then we're going to have a Tzuras HaPesach going to this corner. So it's not Negeah to talk about an opening in this corner. It's not Negeah to talk about an opening in this corner. And down by this corner, this is wide open. So it's not Negeah to talk about an opening in this corner. It's only Negeah to this corner. So why does the Ramah speak about Psachim, openings, and Kronois, corners, Lashon Rabbim? So the Mishnah Berurah explains, Rak Shaliyu Psachim, Hainu, first thing the Chavetz Chaim says is you should know, when we rule out having an opening in this at that corner, we cannot have an opening in this corner, even if you erect a tzuras HaPesach at this corner to close off the opening. So imagine, instead of having this, the sukkah asuya kimin gam, you have this. You have one wall, you have another wall here that's distanced from the corner, and you erect a tzuras HaPesach at that opening. Now, normally we say that a tzuras HaPesach is an effective closure. Over here, says the Chavetz Chaim, no. Sukkah asuya kimin gam has to be actually physically closed. No tzuras HaPesach. Hainu afilu masuyes for tzuras HaPesach. And now the Chavetz Chaim points out something very interesting. Da'af de le'inyan Shabbos. Even though in the context of Hilchas Shabbos, and you would think that we would certainly be the most machmir when it comes to Hilchas Shabbos, da'af de le'inyan Shabbos. Even though in the context of Hilchas Shabbos, al yedei tzuras HaPesach, hevi kisasa mamish, when we have a tzuras HaPesach, we consider something to be effectively closed. Le'inyan Sukkah, chamer yoiser. When it comes to Hilchas Sukkah, we treat it even more stringently, and a tzuras HaPesach is not enough. Why? Because, like I explained to you, we need a physically closed corner. Like I said, the Mechaber makes mention to 2 corners, multiple. Lashon Rabim, kronois. Bakeren hayaloi loymar. Chavetz Chaim is puzzled. The Mechaber should have referenced 1 corner in the singular, because again, there's only 1 corner that this could be negated to. Because again, we're talking about the sukkah asuya kimin gam. There are only 2 complete walls, so there's only 1 corner. We only have 1 corner. Ella the Harama asli la'ashmi inan. The Rama is coming to teach me another halacha. Af heiche de oisa sukkah shal arba tfanoi shleimos. Even if you make a typical, normal, 4-walled sukkah, she'ein loy lasois psachim b'chol karnoiseh. You make a typical 4-wall sukkah. Do not make doorways in all 4 of your corners. Make sure that your corners are closed, at least 1 corner. Because if you have openings in every single corner, because then you're not going to have any 2 walls that are closed off at the corner. And we're saying that even the sukkah hasuya kimin gam, you must have at least 1 closed corner. So you go out on your deck, you go out in your backyard, you think that you're not using any kunsen, you're making mamish 4 walls, you're putting up 4 walls, but you leave doorways at every single corner. Says the Mishnah Berurah, that would be a problem. You don't have a single closed corner, and you have to have at least 1 closed corner. But if you want to make openings in the other 3, you want to leave 1 corner completely closed in the chinami deshari, that would be okay. Okay, now let's go back to the Mechaber, second line down by the Ois Katan Chavav in the Mishnah Berurah. So, what did the Mechaber say here so far? He said, if you have the sukkah hasuya kimin gam, you make your kunts of lavud, tzuras HaPesach, everything else, even if in the totality of the sukkah, when you measure the breached areas, the open spaces on all 4 sides, and you compare it to the closed spaces on all 4 sides, even though you're going to have parts maruba ala oimid, more open space than closed space, that sukkah is still kosher. However, now the Mechaber throws out a caveat. Ubelvad, with the exception, shalo yehei bahem pirtza yisera al eser amos. You cannot have a gap in wall 1 and wall 2 that's more than 10 amos wide. Why is that? Says the Mishnah Berurah is Katan Chavav. Ubelvad, that you don't have an opening Yisera al Eser Amos. The Oz Afilu Oymin Meruba ala Porotz Aser. Once you have an opening of 10 amos wide, that breaches the wall. The wall is no longer considered a closed wall, even if along the totality of the wall you have Oymid Meruba ala Porotz, more closed area than open area. And those of you who learned Hilchas Erevin with me back in Chelik Daled, you'll remember that this was a common rule that we had all over the halachas of mechitzos when it came to Erevin. When you have to have a mechitza, when you have to have a side of a chutzner closed, let's say you have a side of a chutzner that's 30 amos, 40 amos, but you have a 12 amma gap, and it doesn't have a tzuras HaPesach or anything else. At somewhere on that side, you have a 12 amma gap. That's a breach. That whole mechitza is now null and void. That whole side is considered to be opened, even though it's oymin meruba ala paretz. If it's a 40 amma long wall, so now you're going to have 28 amas closed, and you're going to have 12 amas opened. So it's oymin meruba ala paretz. It doesn't matter. A breach of over 10 amas cannot be considered a doorway. It's no longer a doorway, so it's a breach. So that side is completely breached. The Nachsheves lepirza v'loy lepesach. Says however, the Mechaber, so the Mechaber said, "Ubavad shelo yehi b'hem pirza yiser al eser amos," but the Mechaber throws out a tikkun. He says, let's say you do have a breach that's over 10 amos wide. What could you do? If you erect a tzuras HaPesach in that 12 amma long opening, then then it's okay even if it's more than 10 amas wide. As a tzuras HaPesach, it's considered closed. Says the Mishnah Berurah, tzuras Pesach afilu b'yosem eser, the akshav Pesach mikri, because by making a tzuras HaPesach, it turns into a Pesach. So tzuras HaPesach works, says the Mechaber, even in excess of 10 amas, tzuras HaPesach still works. Vein shein pirza aleh, and now it's not considered a pirza. But let's go back to the Mechaber, 3 lines down near the end. Ula Rambam. But according to the Rambam, the famous shita of the Rambam that we always have to deal with when we make Erevin, a lot of people don't use Erevin because of this Rambam. Ula Rambam, according to the shita of the Rambam, afilu yesh lo tzuras HaPesach. Even if that gap of more than 10 amas is misukon, it is repaired, so to speak, with a tzuras HaPesach, im yesh lo pirza yosem yeser psula. According to the Rambam, it doesn't work. You cannot repair a breach of over 10 amas with a tzuras HaPesach, ela im kein oymin meruba ala paretz. The Rambam holds that when does a tzuras HaPesach work in an opening of more than 10 amas? Only if in the totality of the wall you're going to have oymin meruba ala paretz. So in the case I gave you earlier, you have a 40 amma long wall and you have a 12 amma opening in the middle. So the Rambam would agree if you put up a tzuras HaPesach in the 12 amma opening, you're okay. Why? Because on that side of the chutzner you have a wall that's 28 amas closed. And you have 28 amas closed, 12 amas opened. The 12 amas that are opened are masukon with a tzuras HaPesach, so that works because it's oymin meruba ala paretz. But if it would be paretz meruba ala oymid, let's say you had a 12 amma opening, and then you only had 11 amas that were closed, and you want to close off the 12 amma opening with a tzuras HaPesach. According to the Rambam, that does not work. Since it's paretz meruba ala oymid, you can't use a tzuras HaPesach on an opening that's more than 10 amas. So if you imagine what we do on our Erevin, where we encircle a huge area, all with tzuras HaPesachs, that's what we do. Electric poles and wires and lechis and strings. So it's all paretz meruba ala oymid. And we definitely have a lot of openings that are wider than 10 amas. So according to the Rambam, that does not work. Because you're trying to use a tzuras HaPesach on an opening wider than 10 amas, where you also have paretz meruba ala oymid. According to the Rambam, that does not work. Says the Mishnah Berurah ois katan chav zayin. Tzuras HaPesach afilu b'yosem eser. You could use a tzuras HaPesach even in a breach wider than 10, according to this sheet, and not according to the Rambam. Dasha Pesach mikri vein shein pirza aleh. Now we go to the Ramah. I think I just read that Mishnah Berurah twice. Whatever. Let's go to the Ramah. 4 lines down, last word. Hagah. V'nagu achshav. The Ramah says now that you've heard this whole conversation of the Machabers, of how to fix these sukkahs, a sukkah that has two walls, whether it's two perpendicular walls, sukkah asuya kimin gam, or two parallel walls, the Mechaber gave you eitzis using lavud, using tzuras HaPesach, how to close off a third wall to have a kosher sukkah. Now says the Ramah, v'nagu achshav, the minig nowadays is lasois mechitzos shleimos, that we should use fully closed walls. Because not everybody is bucky, not everybody is knowledgeable in the intricacies of the dinim of mechitzos to make sure that they get it right. If you don't have enough materials to make fully closed walls, it's more preferential to make 3 whole walls. The Ramah is telling you, if you have the ability to make 3 fully closed walls, or you could make 2 fully closed walls, and then 2 walls using shtick, better, he says, use 3 full walls and have the 4th wall wide open, because now you definitely have a kosher sukkah. You have 3 complete walls. That is a kosher sukkah. Now, I don't think that the Ramah is coming over here to tell you that nowadays we only use mechitzos shleimos and we could never employ lavud, we could never employ tzuras HaPesach. For example, you have people nowadays who get a canvas sukkah and they're not happy with the stability of the walls, so they use these lavud straps. And they make lavud. Certainly the ones who make lavud, shesi and erev, we'll see later on, that is certainly more preferential than using only shesi, using only vertical straps, so vertical posts. But I don't think the Ramah over here is coming to rule out employing lavud. What he's saying is, in these cases of the Mechaber is talking about these 2.5 wall sukkahs. Now you're really treading on thin ice, because if you don't get the lavud right, if you don't get the tzuras HaPesach right, you don't have a kosher sukkah at all. That's not the cases nowadays that most people employ lavud. So I don't think that's what the Ramah is addressing, but he is addressing in the cases of the Mechaber, where you're really walking on the edge. You only have a 2.5 wall sukkah. We don't use these kind of eitzes that have been delineated here by the Mechaber. Now, it could be that the Mishnah Berurah is stretching the words of the Ramah beyond what I'm saying. Let's take a look here in the Mishnah Berurah. Mishnah Berurah says in Ois Katan Chav Ches, Lasois Mechitzos Shleimos. The meaning nowadays is to make complete walls with Tzarnei Lomar. What the Ramah wants to say is, Shaloya Yedei Eitzos Shalavud Tzuras HaPesach. We don't use these eitzos of lavud and Tzuras HaPesach. Ubahalacha shel Rabbi Yitzchak Gaius, the Maritz Gius, Ra'isi, I've seen, says the Chavetz Chaim, Shekasav Gam Kain de la Mitzvah min Amuvcher, Be'inan Shi Shalish Tavanis HaSukkos, Stumais Bikal Ruchaiseha. So you see, the Chavetz Chaim is bringing down the Ritz Gaius as agreeing with this Ramah. And what does he say? He says, I saw in the Ritz Gaius that Mitzvah min Amuvcher, when you have 3 walls, the 3 walls should be stumais bikal ruchaiseha. They should be completely closed. So again, we're specifically addressing the 2.5 wall cases of the Mechaber. That's when the Ramah is saying we're not noyig nowadays to use lavud and tzuras HaPesach on these 2.5 wall sukkahs. If we're going to have these 2.5 wall sukkahs, we make sure that the 3rd wall is completely closed. The only part of the sukkah that should be open is the actual doorway of the sukkah. Now, before we conclude this year, I want to direct your attention to a very interesting Be'er Heitev here on Tzadik Beis Amud Beis. Be'er Heitev Ois Katan Vav, 2 lines from the bottom of the Be'er Heitev near the end of the line, where he brings down a very interesting Maharash. Kasav Maharil, the Maharil writes, Maharash hayu misamein lemechitzos hasukah. The Maharash used to make simanim. He used to either number the panels of the sukkah or make some other kind of mark on the panels of the sukkah, kedei liroi seder amidasan, to know exactly which panel goes where, shelo yishana mishana l'shana, so that he should not change the location of a panel from one year to the next. The Maharash wanted that each sukkah panel should go precisely in the same place every single year. V'chein hu b'Yerushalmi, and you could find a precedent for this in the Yerushalmi, where the Yerushalmi is talking about the Mishkan in the Midbar, and he brings down the pasuk, V'akemoisa es hamishkan kimishpatoi. They erected the Mishkan kimishpatai, according to its mishpat, according to its halacha. Yerushalmi, v'chiyesh mishpat lekroshim. When they erected the beams of the sukkah, of the Mishkan, when they put up the kroshim, is there a mishpat to the kroshim? Is there a specific din of how the kroshim have to go up? V'chiyesh mishpat lekroshim? Ella, rather the Yerushalmi learns out, keresh shezacha litein batzafain. What this pasuk is telling you is that the keresh that was zoichet to be on the tzafain, to be on the north side of the sukkah, yinatzen la'olam b'tzafain, should always be placed in the north. So the Marash is telling you that you have a precedent over here from the Yerushalmi that there's an inyan, just like by the Mishkan. There was an inyan to make sure that each individual keresh went into the same location all the time. So too by the sukkah there's an inyan that the panels of the sukkah should be in the same place all the time. Now, there are those who take issue with this marash, and it's very easy to ask a kasha on this marash. You could say, what are you making a comparison to the Mishkan? By the Mishkan, what does the Yerushalmi say? The Yerushalmi says, keresh shezacha litein batzafon. The keresh that had the schus to go on the north side should always go on the north side. But that's because the north did have a chashivus in the Mishkan. We know that there are a lot of karbanos. The kachek kachim, a carbon oila, was always brought b'tzafain. The shchita, the hakrava, had to be in the tzafain. Well, the shchita had to be in the tzafain, on the north side. So you see that there was a chashivus to the tzafain. There's also a chashivus to the area of the kachek kachim. So the kroshim, the beams that made up the walls of the Mishkan, a beam that was zoichet to be one of the walls of the kachek kachim, you don't want to denigrate it now. Malin ve'ein meridin. We elevate things, we don't take them down. So we don't want to take it from the kachek kachim and put it in the lesser heichal. So by the Mishkan, there seems to be a very valid reason why we should want the kroshim to always be in the same locale. What does that have to do with the Mishkan? What's the difference in the Mishkan if it should go in the tzafain or it should go in the daraim? There is no kachek kachim. There is no greater chashivas to the tzafain. I think the answer to this question, and maybe that's why the Ber Hetiv brings this down here in Siman Tov Reish Lamed, is there is perhaps a difference in the kedusha, so to speak, of the sukkah, and that is there are 3 walls that are necessary for the sukkah. There are 3 walls that make up the minimum hechsher sukkah. The same way by a minyan, there's an inyan to be me'asara harishonim, from the first 10 people who come to shul for the minyan. Why? Because you made the minyan. Fellow number 23 did not make the minyan. Wall number 4 did not make the sukkah. Wall number 1, wall number 2, at least part of wall number 3, they're what makes the sukkah. So could be that there's a difference between being in wall number 4 or being in wall number 1. Okay, thank you so much for joining me for Limud HaTorah. The schus of Limud HaTorah should be made against Klal Yisrael. The Rebbeinu Shalom should send Yeshuas, Refuas, and Parnasa to all those in need, and we should be Zaycha finally to see the B'Yas Tzedek B'Mehera V'Yameinu. Amen. Be well.